This is Benjamin from English Classes Online. In today's lesson, we want to look at how to use phrasal verbs. Let's jump into it with a quick look at the lesson objectives. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to 1. Explain the meaning of phrasal verbs. 2. Explain the structure of phrasal verbs. And 3. Mention phrasal verbs and explain how to use them in sentences. What is a phrasal verb? That's the basic question that we want to look at. What exactly is a phrasal verb? A phrasal verb is a type of verb that consists of a verb and one or more particles, usually prepositions or adverbs. The combination of the verb and the particle or particles creates a new meaning that is different from the meanings of the individual words. Examples of phrasal verbs include turn up, run away, and take out, go out, stand up, sit down, etc. Phrasal verbs are commonly used in spoken and informal English to indicate action. A phrasal verb can convey literal or figurative meaning, and some phrasal verbs can be both literal and figurative. Now let's begin with literal phrasal verbs. These phrasal verbs mean exactly what they say, such as sit down, come in, go out, stand up. So when someone says sit down, it means sit and then, down. Now, stand up means stand and, stand up. So those are literal phrasal verbs or phrasal verbs with literal meaning, if you like. The next one is figurative phrasal verbs. These phrasal verbs convey meanings that are different from the meanings of the exact words they contain. Let's look at some examples. Break up. Now, the phrasal verb break up is made up of break and up. And then the meaning here is to end a relationship. Mark and Jane have broken up. The meaning is, different from the meaning of break and up. Then look down on is another phrasal verb, and it means to treat someone as unimportant. For example, they looked down on her because her parents were poor. Okay? Then there are phrasal verbs with multiple meanings, which means that such phrasal verbs can have both literal and figurative meanings. Let's look at some examples. Let down. Let down can mean fail to support someone. When you fail to support someone, it means you have let them down. For example, if you let me down, I will never trust you again. See? Then another meaning of let down is to lower something slowly. For example, they let down a basket on a chain. Another example of phrasal verb with multiple meanings is go up. One of the meanings is to rise. When you are talking of prices or costs of goods or projects, you can use the phrasal verb go up. For example, the prices of goods keep going up. Or you can say, well, house rents have gone up recently. Now, another meaning of go up is to explode suddenly. There was a gas leak and the whole building went up. That means the whole building exploded. Okay? So, having looked at what we mean by phrasal verbs, Let's now look at the structure of phrasal verbs. The structure of phrasal verbs typically includes a verb followed by one or more particles. The particles can be prepositions or adverbs, and they change the meaning of the verb. Let's look at some examples. Verb plus preposition or adverb, and one example is, well, let me draw your attention here. You see, this is the verb come. Okay. In here is the preposition. Okay. Come in. So you have a verb here, and then you have a preposition. Okay. Then you have go out. Go is the verb, out is the preposition. Okay. So that's exactly the way it is. Then another structure is where you have, let me undo this mark so we won't be confused. You have verb plus object plus preposition. So here you have throw the refuse out. This is the verb. Let's denote this with V. The refuse is the object, and away is the preposition. Throw the refuse away. Well, away here may not necessarily be a preposition, because a preposition will usually come, you will usually go with a noun. So throw the refuse away. So this can be adverb. Okay, it's an adverbial particle. Throw the refuse away. Then let's look at another structure. Well, another example is put the knife down. Put is the verb, the knife is the object, down is, of course, the preposition, okay? You have verb plus preposition plus, plus preposition or adverb plus objects. You see? So you have the verb and the preposition. You have this structure. For example, you have the phrasal verb. Well, this is the phrasal verb, and then the objects. Then the object, okay? And so here, throw away the refuse. Throw away the refuse, okay? That's exactly the structure. Well, having looked at the structure, let's now move on. Of course, there are more examples, switch off the lights and so on. There's something to note before we move on to the next thing, and that is that this type of structure cannot be used with pronouns. For example, throw away it is wrong. You can only say throw it away. You see, you can say throw the refuse away. If you use a noun or a noun phrase, you can put the noun or noun phrase between the in between the phrasal verb, but you can't put the pronoun. You cannot say, you can say throw it away. No, you can put the pronoun in between the phrasal verb, but you cannot uh, put the pronoun after the phrasal verb. For example, you cannot say switch off it. You can only say switch it off, not switch off it. Not throw away it, but throw it away. I hope that is understood. Now, this brings us to types of phrasal verbs and how to use them. So let's begin to look at them. The first is transitive phrasal verbs. You have transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs. You have phrasal verbs that are separable and phrasal verbs that are inseparable. Now, let's look at them. But the two basic classes are transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs, just as we have transitive verbs and intransitive verbs. Now, a transitive phrasal verb requires an object. That is what makes it transitive. Now, let's look at the examples. The world leaders must find a way to do away with all nuclear weapons. So here, do away with is the phrasal verb. Then nuclear weapons is the object. So you see, it is a transitive phrasal verb because it is used with an object. So the sentence is incomplete in meaning if we remove the object. For example, if you say the world leaders must find a way to do away with, if you put full stop, the listener must ask you a question. Do away with what? And so it requires an object. Now let's take another example. Henry has decided to go into rice importation. Now, go into is the phrasal verb. Rice importation is the object. So you can see the phrasal verb here. Okay. And you can see the object. Again, the sentence is incomplete if we remove the object. Henry has decided to go into. The listener must ask you a question. Into what? Rice importation. That is the object. So these are the types of phrasal verbs that are called transitive phrasal verbs because they require an object to complete the meaning of the sentence in which they are used. Okay, so that is about transitive phrasal verbs. Then we want to look at other aspects of how we can use transitive phrasal verbs. Transitive phrasal verbs can be inseparable. Some transitive phrasal verbs can be inseparable. They can be used as inseparable. All right? What do we mean by inseparable? When we say inseparable, we mean that the phrasal verbs, the words that make up the phrasal verbs must be used together. You can't put an object between them. Let's look at examples. Children should look after their aged parents. The transitive verb here is look after. This means that you cannot put the object here is their aged parents. And so you cannot lift aged parents and put it between look and after. Otherwise, the meaning will be distorted. You cannot say, for example, children should look their aged parents after. It doesn't make any meaning at all. Okay? So you must use look after together for it to convey the intended meaning. Children should look after their aged parents. Now let's look at another example. Rose ran into her former boss. Now the object here is her former boss. Again, you cannot lift this object and put it between ran and into. Otherwise, it will be wrong. Okay? You cannot say Rose ran her former boss into. No, it is meaningless. To run into someone is to meet by chance. So you must use ran into together. Rose ran into her former boss. These are inseparable. Even though they are transitive phrasal verbs, they must be used as inseparable. Okay? Now let's undo the marks and then we look at more instances of how we can use transitive phrasal verbs. Now, we can use transitive phrasal verbs either as separable or inseparable. There are some transitive verbs that can be used both as separable and as inseparable. And this is because transitive phrasal verbs take objects. And so it is possible for some of them to be separated and some of them to be put together. Let's look at examples of what we mean. Junior was asked to switch off the light. Here, we didn't separate the phrasal verb. Switch off the light. Now, this is the object, and this is the phrasal verb. So we use the phrasal verb together, and then we add the object. So they are not separated here. We can still separate them. Junior was asked to switch the light off. So if you look at this, switch and off are the two parts of this phrasal verb. And so we have put this object in the middle. Okay? So this is separated. So you have some phrasal verbs that you can use either as separable or as inseparable. We have seen phrasal verbs that must be used as inseparable. You can't separate the parts of the phrasal verb. But then we have seen some phrasal verbs that you may choose to separate the parts or you use them together. So that is exactly about the use, how we can use some transitive phrasal verb. Now, one thing you cannot do is that if you want to separate, you cannot use a pronoun. For example, the pronoun of the light is it. You cannot say Junior was asked to switch off it. No. If you are using a pronoun as the object, then you must use this type of transitive verbs as inseparable. I mean, as separated, switch it off. It comes between switch and off. Okay? But you cannot put the phrasal verb together and then you add the pronoun. That will be absolutely wrong. And that's what we have here. Switch off it. No. Switch off here is the phrasal verb. It here is the pronoun. It is wrong to, use that kind of structure. Now, having said that, let's now move on to look at other types of phrasal verbs and how we can use them. But let's undo this mark so we don't get confused. Okay. Now, this brings us to intransitive phrasal verbs. We have looked at transitive. Now we are looking at intransitive. Now, intransitive phrasal verbs are phrasal verbs that do not require an object to complete the sentence. Okay? Let's look at examples of intransitive phrasal verbs. Mr. Okon's car broke down on the way. Now, broke down here is intransitive phrasal verb. It doesn't require an object. In fact, we can even remove on the way, and this will still be meaningful. Mr. Okon's car broke down, full stop. It doesn't require any object. She told Jack to go away and leave her alone. No object is required after go away. We can even remove the rest of the sentence. She told Jack to go away, full stop. It doesn't require any object. By the way, on the way is not an object, and leave her alone is also not an object. Okay, so then one other thing we need to know about how we use intransitive verbs is that intransitive verbs, phrasal verbs, are always inseparable. Since intransitive verbs do not take any object, it is not possible to separate the verb and the particle. They must go together. So essentially, whenever you are using an intransitive phrasal verb, you must use the parts of the phrasal verb together. You can't break it or separate it. Let's look at examples. The man fell off the bridge. Okay, the man fell off the bridge. The phrasal verb here is fell off. Fell off is an intransitive phrasal verb. For example, you can say the man fell off, full stop. Now, fell off the bridge. You can't bring the bridge in between fell and off. Otherwise, the meaning will be meaningless. The man fell the bridge off is meaningless. Okay. Let's take another example. She is looking, sorry, that was a mistake. She is looking for her child. The phrasal verb here is looking for. Again, you can't separate looking and from and for. You cannot. You cannot say, for example, she's looking her child for. No, that is meaningless. She is looking for her child. So that's what you need to take note of when you want to use intransitive phrasal verbs. Now, the next type of phrasal verb we want to look at is a kind of structural type, three-word phrasal verbs. Now, phrasal verbs that are formed with two particles after the verb are called three-word phrasal verbs. And when using them, take note that they are usually inseparable. You must use them as inseparable. Let's look at example. Look up to. This is the three-word phrasal verb. Now, this is the verb, the phrasal verb, if you like. This is the verb, of course. Up and to are the particles. These are the particles. Okay. And so, nothing can come between the verb and the particles. They must be inseparable. For example, you cannot say children normally look their parents up to. No, that will distort the meaning. So whenever you find a three-word phrasal verb, if the phrasal verb contains three words, you can't separate them. You must use them as inseparable. Now let's look at other examples. Let's erase this. Tony could no longer put up with his wife's nagging. You cannot lift this and put it between the verb and the particles. For example, you cannot say Tony could no longer put his wife's nagging up with. That would be meaningless, completely meaningless, okay? Another example, the rich should not look down on the poor. You cannot lift the poor and place it between look and down on. For example, you cannot say the rich should not look the poor down on. That will distort the meaning. You must use this together. The rich should not look down on the poor. Okay? And this brings us to the end of today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. If you did, like the video and share it with your friends and relations. See you in the next class. Many thanks for watching today's video. A big thank you to all of you out there for being part of today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, kindly subscribe to this channel. Subscribe now as a way of giving us support. For notification about new videos, click on the bell icon. You will find the bell icon. Click on it so that whenever a new video is uploaded, you will be instantly notified. If you have actually enjoyed the video, like and share the video with your friends and relatives. This is very important. If you have any comments, leave your comments below. Any questions, any suggestions, we would gladly receive them and respond promptly and positively to them. See you in the next video. I look forward to always seeing you